There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store.
And so now we have these lonely, deluded women, and they're living in a cave, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And we don't know how long they've been in these mountains, but they're believing their own lies, and they devise this plan. Because these girls, they don't want to be lonely, and they want to have families, because they're women. And women generally want to have children. And it's even possible that these women could be in their 30s. They could be thinking that time is not on their side anymore. And they don't trust that God is going to provide for them husbands. But they do know that their dad in no way would never, ever go for the plan that they developed. Because they knew it was sin, so they also knew they had to deceive him. And so they get him drunk. But that probably wasn't very hard to do, because it probably happened all the time. And then they carried out their plan. And Lot knew nothing at first. And you kind of wonder how he found out. But when he did find out, you kind of wonder how hard it would have been for him to live with the fact of how far that he had fallen. Because you remember, Lot's an old man here, and he was successful. He was what you would call a self-made man. And he was a man that had gained all his success by being shrewd and by compromising with the world for a position of honor. But now he's going to finish his days out living like a fool. And that's not really how you want to spend your retirement. And these people, they created such a world of confusion. And then you just think about the kids of growing up with this kind of dishonor and the shame, and all the people around there, they knew it. So what can they do? All they can do now is just kind of hide away. And it's very ironic that these girls that Lot had offered to the crowd of men to be molested, well, they end up molesting him. And we never learn these girls' names, but we learn the names of their sons. The older daughter's son's name was Moab, which means from the father. And the younger daughter, her son's name was Ben-Ami, and that means son of my people. So even with these names, these daughters, they're not even trying to hide where their children came from. And their descendants became two nations, the nations of the Moabites and the Ammonites. And they were the perpetual enemies of Israel. And we'll read about them later, that when Israel was actually freed from their slavery in Egypt, they try to seek their help when they come to claim their land that was given to them by God. And they attacked Israel. But even after they did attack Israel, God still wouldn't give them their land, because God always had seen these people as Abraham's relatives. He saw them and called them the children of Lot. And so now we have Moab, which is located on the east side of the Dead Sea, which is not too far from where Sodom was located. And then Ammon is just north of it on the east side of the Jordan River. Today, that country is called modern-day Jordan. And you would think that these people who began with such a Jerry Springer inbred hillbilly type start, that they would have absolutely no hope. And these nations, they became idolaters, and they actually committed human sacrifice to their gods, Chemosh and to Molech, and they also served the sex cults of the Ashtoreths, and which had always been this huge snare to the people of Israel. And we read in Deuteronomy 23:3, we're told, no Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord. And so this is the point where you could think, can any good come out of these people? And you might think that, no good. But you'd find that that's not true. Because it was through these people, there comes one of the greatest redemption stories ever told in the Bible. And it involves a young Moabite girl named Ruth. And she actually left her people and she clung to the God of Israel. And it's all because of her Israelite mother-in-law. And this Moabite, Ruth, she becomes the Gentile bride of her kinsman redeemer, who was Boaz. And now Boaz, he was actually the son of Rahab the harlot. But in this story, Boaz, he's clearly a type of Jesus Christ. And of his taking of that Gentile bride is like Jesus taking his Gentile bride, which is the church, and redeeming her, the church, for himself. And this Ruth was not only the grandmother of King David, but she's one of the only 4 women mentioned in the lineage of Christ. And she's a Moabite. She's one of Lot's daughter's sons. So now we're going to leave Lot, and we're going to leave his family, and there's a couple things that we should actually take away from the story. And one of them is, as a believer, you need to seek the Lord with all your decisions. And even at the very beginning of where you're going to live. And you don't want to be fooled by looking at the well-watered land, and not to let your success be your main goal, where you'll compromise your moral integrity and to become a friend of the world just to get ahead. Because you see, Lot, he may have been able to handle all the worldly temptations of Sodom, and he still may have been able to maintain his righteousness. But his wife and his children, they couldn't. They couldn't handle it. Because when they lived in Sodom, they became like Sodom. And so we need to protect ourselves from what type of moral surroundings we put ourselves in and what we put our families in. And that could compare to our lives of what type of movies we'll watch, or what kind of music we listen to, or the video games you're allowed to play, or what kind of events we go to, what type of concerts or parties. Because you may be able to handle it, but your kids might not. All right. Now, if you're not married and you're looking for a spouse, you need to find one who's like-minded in all the things of the Lord. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? Because we see in our story, Lot and his wife, they were not like-minded. And in these types of marriages, the children, they will know the morals of the godly parent, but they can also feel the freedom to practice the liberal lifestyle of the non-believer. And they actually think they'll be all right. And the truth is that most people, they'll always seek the easy path. They will seek the path of compromise. Okay, and lastly here, when God rescues you, and remember, God did rescue those girls, you need to wait for him. You need to trust God. You need to trust him to bring the things that you desire into your life, and not to take matters into your own hands, because he knows where you are and he sees you. Those girls, they needed to wait. And I believe that God would have brought them husbands, but they were just tired of waiting. But they should have known that the God who loved them enough to save them He would also provide for them and for all their needs. But they wouldn't trust him. Well, you don't do that. You wait. You trust God. God loves us, and he would never keep anything that's good for us from us. But it will always be in his time, just like it was for Abraham and Sarah. All right, so now we're done with Lot. Kind of glad to get rid of Lot. And we could really use a break from all this drama. And so you'd think us going back to Abraham, things would get maybe a little better. And Abraham, he's leaving. And the last time we saw Abraham leave the area where he's been living was about 25 years before this. And that time it was because of the famine, and he ended up down in Egypt. This time we don't know why he's leaving, but it may have something to do with that smoldering land and that devastation of Sodom, because it just happened. And now that beauty of that land, that used to look like the Garden of Eden, and you used to view it every day from your hillside and drinking your coffee in the morning. Well, now it's just a burnt up wasteland. It reminds you of Lot, and it reminds you of all the wickedness of that area, and it's just a waste. And so now Abraham, he's traveling south, and he's going into the Philistine country, but he's still in the land of Canaan. But Abraham, he's not really sure that God's going before him. But we're really not sure that this isn't God's will for him. But we can be sure that what happens next is not God's way for him. Because Abraham, our father of faith, for the fear of his own life, he lies again. And this has always been a real major downfall for him, because it's just like he did 25 years ago before the Pharaoh of Egypt. And we would have thought by now that this sin of lying in Abraham's life, it had already been dealt with. But if you just put together the right set of circumstances, and then you mix the right amount of fear with the right temptations, Abraham, he falls right back into his old behavior. The same old lies, the same lack of faith. And so he resorts to self-preservation. This was natural for him. And apparently it was also natural for Sarah. So now Abraham, he tells Abimelech, he says, Sarah's my sister. Now, Abimelech is not this person's name. Abimelech is his title. Abimelech in Hebrew means king or father leader. And without hesitation, Abimelech, he takes Sarah and he puts her in his harem. And so here we see Abraham again. His worst fears come upon him. And there's a couple reasons why Abimelech would have taken Sarah into his harem. One of them is that Abraham, he's a very powerful man. And this is the way you would make a treaty with somebody, by taking the most desirable single female and you make her a wife. It's kind of like having a political alliance. Now, the second reason is that Sarah's beautiful. And she may be 90 years old, but those years have been very kind to her.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.